This neglected German Shepherd was found chained to a pole, so matted and filthy she was barely recognizable as a dog. Everyone walked past, ignoring her desperate cries, until one woman made a decision that would change everything. The transformation is so incredible you'll need tissues when you see her now, and the miraculous twist that followed left an entire community in tears. The rain fell in sheets that cold November morning as Melissa Sanders hurried toward her bus stop, already late, for her shift at the downtown veterinary clinic. Cutting through an abandoned lot, she nearly missed seeing it. A dark shape huddled against a rusted pole, partially hidden by weeds. Something made her stop. Melissa turned, squinting through the downpour toward what she initially thought was discarded garbage. It was a dog. A German Shepherd, female, chained to the metal pole with a heavy chain so short she could barely lie down. The dog's condition was shocking. Fur matted with dirt and waste, forming solid plates against her emaciated frame. Open sores marked where the heavy chain had rubbed her neck raw. Most disturbing were her eyes, clouded with infection but somehow alert, watching Melissa with a combination of fear and hopelessness. "Oh my God," Melissa whispered, approaching slowly. "How long have you been here?" The dog made no sound, no movement beyond slightly flattening her ears. The chain was secured, with a heavy padlock to a collar that had become embedded in the dog's neck as she'd grown. Nearby, a filthy container held stagnant rainwater, her only hydration. There was no food bowl, no shelter from the elements. Judging by the waste and the circular track worn into the dirt, the German Shepherd had been there for months. Melissa's bus passed. She didn't even look up. "I'm going to help you," she said, kneeling at a safe distance. "I promise." She called the clinic. "I'll be late. I found a dog. No, not just a stray. This is deliberate neglect, the worst I've ever seen." Within 30 minutes, her supervisor arrived with a van, transport crate, muzzle, and bolt cutters. 2 other vet techs came along. What they found shocked even these experienced professionals. "This is criminal," said Dr. Richards, the clinic's owner, who had decided to come himself. "Absolutely criminal." The rescue itself was surprisingly calm. The German Shepherd offered no resistance as they carefully muzzled her and cut away the chain. Perhaps she lacked the strength for fight or flight, or perhaps she somehow understood this was her only chance. As they lifted her into the crate, the dog's gaze met Melissa's. Something passed between them, a connection that would ultimately change both their lives. "We'll call her Hope," Dr. Richards suggested as they loaded the crate, "because that is what she needs now." Melissa shook her head, still holding the German Shepherd's gaze. "No, her name is Duchess. I don't know why, but it's her name. She's not what they made her. She's who she was meant to be." What Melissa didn't know was that the chain they'd just cut away was only the most visible of the bonds that had held Duchess captive, and that breaking the others would require even greater courage. Duchess's examination at the clinic revealed the full extent of her neglect. Beneath the matted fur, her body was a map of suffering. Ribs and hip bones protruding sharply, pressure sores, untreated infections, broken teeth, and paw pads worn raw. Most disturbing was her neck, where the collar had become partially embedded as she grew. "She's severely malnourished and dehydrated," Dr. Richards reported. "Multiple infections, anemia, likely heartworm positive. I'm amazed she's still alive." Melissa stayed long after her shift, helping sedate Duchess for the careful process of shaving away the matted fur and treating her urgent medical needs. As layers of filth were removed, the true Duchess began to emerge. A purebred German Shepherd, probably around 3 years old. "She must have been quite beautiful once," observed Dr. Matthews, the senior veterinarian, "and could be again with proper care." "She will be," Melissa said with determination. "I'll foster her through recovery." The statement surprised even herself. Melissa lived in a small apartment that didn't allow pets, worked long hours, and had never owned a dog as an adult. Yet something about Duchess had awakened a fierce protective instinct. "Melissa, this dog needs months of rehabilitation," Dr. Richards cautioned. "Not just medical, but behavioral. We have no idea what she's been through." "I'll figure it out," Melissa insisted. "I can't explain it, but I need to do this." By evening, Duchess had been stabilized, sedated, and bandaged. She slept in the clinic's intensive care kennel while Melissa made frantic calls, to her landlord begging an exception to the no pets policy, to friends searching for alternative housing, to rescue organizations seeking support. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Laura Chen, a clinic client whose elderly golden retriever had recently passed away, called after seeing Duchess's photo on the clinic's private social media update. "I have a house with a fenced yard," Laura explained, "and I work from home. I'm not ready for another dog of my own yet, but I'd be happy to provide space for this one during recovery." It was the first in a series of small miracles. By the following afternoon, arrangements were made. Duchess would remain at the clinic for initial stabilization, then transfer to Laura's home where Melissa would visit daily to provide care. What nobody anticipated was Duchess's remarkable spirit. Despite pain and weakness, she showed no aggression toward the humans treating her, only that same watchful wariness, as if constantly expecting the worst, while hoping for something better. "She's either never known kindness or had forgotten it existed," Dr. Matthews observed. "Watch how she flinches at sudden movements, but leans almost imperceptibly toward gentle contact." As the days passed, subtle changes emerged. The first tail wag, so slight it might have been missed if Melissa hadn't been watching closely. The first genuine relaxation into sleep. The first cautious acceptance of a treat from an open palm. Today she made eye contact for 5 full seconds without looking away, Melissa wrote in her journal on day 7. "There's someone in there waiting to be found." Duchess's transition to Laura's home marked the beginning of true rehabilitation. The quiet house with its secluded backyard provided a controlled environment free from the stresses of the clinic setting. Laura had prepared a dedicated space in her spare bedroom, a comfortable dog bed, water bowl, and crate with the door removed to serve as a safe retreat. The room's windows overlooked the fenced yard, allowing natural light while maintaining security. "Remember, let her set the pace," Dr. Matthews had advised. "Her physical wounds are just the surface. The psychological recovery may take much longer." Indeed, during those first days, Duchess spent most of her time in the corner of the room, back to the wall, watching. She accepted food and medication, used the puppy pads provided, too afraid yet to venture outside, but remained disconnected, present in body but absent in spirit. Melissa visited daily, sitting quietly in the room, reading aloud. The sound of a calm human voice, the consultant behaviorist had suggested, could help rebuild positive associations without pressure. On high. The 5th day, Laura texted Melissa a photo that brought tears to her eyes. Duchess still in her corner, but with her head resting on the edge of the bed Laura had placed nearby, the smallest possible venture beyond her self-imposed boundary. "Progress," Melissa replied, adding the image to her growing collection. The first major breakthrough came during week 3. Melissa arrived to find Laura sitting cross-legged on the floor, quietly working on her laptop. Duchess was asleep on the dog bed just 4 feet away, the first time she'd used it rather than the floor corner. "She did it on her own," Laura whispered. "I didn't coax or treat, just came into work, and after about an hour, she moved to the bed." That night, Melissa positioned herself on the floor near Duchess's bed, still reading aloud but now close enough that the dog could initiate contact if she chose. For nearly an hour, nothing changed. Then, just as Melissa was preparing to leave, it happened. Duchess extended her neck forward and delicately sniffed Melissa's hand where it rested on the floor. The contact lasted less than 2 seconds. Duchess immediately retreated to her safe position, but it was deliberate, an intentional choice to investigate rather than withdraw. Melissa maintained her calm exterior. "Good girl," she said softly, continuing to read for another 10 minutes before making her unhurried departure. In her car, she finally allowed herself to cry, tears of relief, hope, and privilege at witnessing such courage. This creature, who had every reason to reject human contact forever, was somehow finding the strength to reach beyond her trauma. The physical changes in Duchess were becoming evident as well. With proper nutrition, her ribs were less prominent, her coat beginning to grow in with surprising luster. The infections had cleared, and the surgical wound on her neck was healing cleanly. Most remarkable was the emergence of Duchess's natural beauty. As her health improved, her true heritage became apparent. She was not just any German Shepherd, but one with exceptional conformation and distinctive markings. "Someone paid a lot of money for her as a puppy," remarked the shelter veterinarian who had come to evaluate her, before abandoning her to that hell. By the end of the first month, Duchess had progressed to exploring the entire spare room and brief ventures into the hallway. She would accept treats directly from Melissa and Laura, and had begun responding to simple verbal cues, Duchess, gentle, and most significantly, safe, as reassurance during moments of fear. The video was not intended to go viral. Melissa had been documenting Duchess's recovery primarily for the clinic's records. This particular clip, showing the first time Duchess voluntarily placed her head in Melissa's lap, had been shared on her private social media for friends following the rescue story. Someone shared it, then someone else. Within 24 hours, the 90-second video had been viewed over 100,000 times. The image of the German Shepherd, still visibly scarred but with growing confidence, making this deliberate choice to trust, struck a chord that resonated far beyond Melissa's circle. The moment a formerly abused dog chooses to trust again, read the most common caption. Comments poured in by the thousands, many from people sharing their own rescue stories, others simply expressing emotion. Local news picked up the story, interviewing Melissa and Laura about Duchess's journey. The resulting segment caught the attention of a national morning show, which featured a longer piece as part of their Heroes Among Us series. Suddenly, the quiet rehabilitation process became a public journey. Melissa created a dedicated social media account to channel the unexpected attention constructively, focusing on education about animal rescue and rehabilitation. "We never expected this attention," Melissa explained during one interview. "But if Duchess's journey helps other animals in similar situations, then something meaningful comes from her suffering." Donations began arriving, first in small amounts, then larger contributions as Duchess's story spread. Laura and Melissa established a proper non-profit, Duchess's Second Chance, to manage the funds responsibly and support other neglected animals needing specialized rehabilitation. Throughout this attention, Duchess continued her steady progress. By the third month, she had gained appropriate weight, completed her heartworm treatment, and begun basic training. The frightened dog from the chain was gradually revealing herself to be intelligent, responsive, and remarkably resilient. Most significant was her developing bond with Melissa, who had rearranged her life to remain central in Duchess's recovery. Though Laura provided the physical home, Melissa had become Duchess's emotional anchor, the human the German Shepherd looked to for reassurance. "It's not unusual in rehabilitation cases," explained Dr. Carter, the behavioral veterinarian consulting on Duchess's case. "She's formed a primary attachment to the person she associates with her rescue. What's remarkable is the depth of that connection despite her history." Duchess showed an almost uncanny awareness of Melissa's emotional states, positioning herself as physical support when Melissa was tired, or placing her head gently in Melissa's lap during moments of stress. This intuitive responsiveness suggested potential beyond ordinary pet owner dynamics. When Dr. Carter suggested formal evaluation for therapy dog training, Melissa was skeptical. "She's still recovering herself. Isn't that asking too much?" "Actually, might be exactly what she needs," Dr. Carter replied. "Many former rescue dogs thrive when given purpose, and Duchess shows natural empathy that can't be trained." To everyone's surprise, except perhaps Dr. Carter's, Duchess demonstrated exceptional aptitude, maintaining calm focus in distracting environments, showing appropriate social behavior with strangers, and most importantly, displaying that natural empathy. "She's reading human emotional states better than many dogs with no trauma history," the evaluator noted. "It's as if her own experience has given her unique sensitivity." 6 months after her rescue, Duchess attended her first public event, a fundraiser for the foundation created in her name. Wearing her certified therapy dog vest, she moved calmly through the gathered crowd. Her transformation so complete that many who had followed her story online had difficulty recognizing her. "She carries herself like royalty now," observed one attendee, inadvertently echoing the name Melissa had intuited that first rain-soaked day. Indeed, there was something regal in Duchess's demeanor, not arrogance, but a quiet dignity that drew people to her. Children especially seemed to connect with her, and she showed remarkable gentleness with them, despite having no previous positive experiences with young humans. The foundation had grown beyond expectations, now supporting specialized rehabilitation for dozens of severely neglected animals. Melissa continued her work at the veterinary clinic, but had reduced her hours to accommodate her growing role in the foundation and Duchess's therapy dog commitments. Laura, whose temporary housing offer had evolved into a permanent arrangement, had become the foundation's administrative director. Her home remained Duchess's safe haven, though the German Shepherd now confidently occupied all spaces. The most significant development came when a neurologist at the regional children's hospital reached out to explore whether Duchess might work with their long-term patients. Children with traumatic injuries or chronic conditions often faced psychological challenges alongside physical ones, and animal therapy had shown promising results. Duchess's first hospital visit was approached with careful preparation. What happened instead astonished even those who knew her best. From the moment she entered the pediatric wing, Duchess displayed an intuitive understanding of her purpose. Most remarkable was her apparent ability to adjust her interaction style to each child's specific needs. With Emma, an energetic 6-year-old, recovering from surgery, Duchess engaged playfully. But with Tyler, a withdrawn teenager with severe burns, her approach transformed completely. She simply rested her head gently on his bed, maintaining calm eye contact, until, remarkably, the boy who had refused to engage with therapists reached out to touch her ear. "She somehow knows exactly what each child needs," observed Dr. Patel, the hospital's integration therapy director. "It's beyond standard therapy dog training." The success of that initial visit led to a regular schedule at the hospital. Twice weekly, Duchess worked with selected patients, her calm presence creating space for emotional and physical breakthroughs that sometimes eluded traditional approaches. Most notable was her work with nonverbal children, where her capacity for connection transcended the limitations of language. Parents reported that children who struggled to communicate with humans sometimes told things to Duchess, whispering into her attentive ears, or demonstrating through touch what they couldn't express in words. "She's not just sensing their emotional states," Dr. Patel noted. "She's actively responding to unspoken needs. I've worked with therapy animals for 15 years and never seen this level of intuitive interaction." The hospital began formally documenting Duchess's work, collaborating with researchers studying animal-assisted therapy. Preliminary findings suggested that her own trauma history might have created specialized neural pathways related to emotional detection and response, essentially a form of shared experience that facilitated deeper connection. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. A bus carrying children from a Special Olympics training event had crashed on the highway. Multiple injuries and dozens of traumatized children were being transported to including the children's facility, where Duchess regularly worked. "They're asking if you and Duchess can come," Laura explained. "They're setting up a crisis response area for the children who aren't physically injured but are experiencing trauma reactions." Within 30 minutes, Melissa and Duchess arrived at the hospital, where the emergency response was in full operation. Dr. Patel met them at the staff entrance. "We have a room set up for the children who've been medically cleared but are showing signs of acute stress," she explained. "Many are nonverbal baseline, or have gone nonverbal from shock." The room held approximately 15 children with various special needs, all from the bus accident. Some were crying, others completely withdrawn. A few displayed repetitive self-soothing behaviors. The overwhelmed child psychologist and social workers were doing their best, but the collective trauma energy was palpable. Duchess paused at the threshold, her body language shifting into her working mode. Alert but calm, fully present, and completely focused on the humans in distress. Without specific direction, she began moving through the room, approaching each child with careful consideration. What happened next would later be described by Dr. Patel as triage of the soul. Duchess moved first to those in most acute distress, offering grounding physical presence. With one boy who was hitting himself, she simply pressed her body against his legs until the repetitive motion ceased. For a girl silently crying in the corner, she placed her head gently in the child's lap. Most remarkable was her work with a severely autistic child who had retreated completely into himself. Duchess approached differently, not making direct contact but positioning herself nearby, creating a sense of protective presence without intrusion. Gradually, the boy's rigid posture softened, his gaze eventually shifting to the patient shepherd waiting beside him. When he finally reached one hand to touch Duchess's ear, the social worker gasped. It was the first responsive action he'd shown since the accident. "She's doing what we can't," Dr. Patel whispered, creating safety that transcends verbal reassurance. For over 3 hours, Duchess worked with the traumatized children. While medical teams handled physical injuries, the German Shepherd addressed wounds invisible but equally critical: fear, shock, and the disorientation of sudden trauma. Parents arriving were astonished by the transformation in those who had spent time with Duchess. Children who had been unreachable were calm enough to communicate, whether through words, signs, or simply restored eye contact. As the situation resolved, Dr. Patel pulled Melissa aside. "What Duchess did today wasn't just therapy. It was crisis response at a level I've never witnessed from an animal. We need to document this properly." The hospital administration agreed. In the weeks that followed, they developed a formal protocol for animal-assisted crisis intervention, with Duchess as the model. Her intuitive approaches were analyzed by behavioral experts and translated into training guidelines for other therapy dogs, though all acknowledged that her specific abilities seemed uniquely enhanced. 1 year after Duchess's rescue, Melissa stood in the town square, watching as the mayor unveiled a bronze statue commemorating the German Shepherd's journey and impact. The life-size sculpture depicted Duchess in her therapy pose, alert but calm, embodying the quiet strength that had become her hallmark. "This monument stands not just for one dog's remarkable story," the mayor announced, "but for the transformative power of compassion in our community and beyond." Duchess sat regally beside Melissa during the ceremony, seemingly understanding the significance. At 3 years since her rescue, she was in her prime, a magnificent example of her breed with a glossy coat that belied her traumatic beginnings. Only the small patch of white scar tissue on her neck remained, as a visible reminder of the chain that had once defined her existence. The Duchess Foundation had grown into a nationally recognized organization. The crisis response protocol developed around Duchess's work had been implemented by emergency services in 7 states, with demonstrable improvements in outcomes for trauma victims. More significant was the effect on animal welfare legislation. Duchess's law, recently passed by the state legislature, strengthened penalties for animal abandonment and mandated psychological evaluation for certain categories of animal cruelty. As the ceremony concluded, Melissa took a moment alone with Duchess in the quiet square. "Did you know this was in you all along?" she asked softly, scratching behind the shepherd's ears. "This capacity to heal after being so broken." The most profound aspect of Duchess's work had emerged over the past year: her specific affinity for working with trauma survivors across populations, from veterans with PTSD to children recovering from abuse. Duchess showed an uncanny ability to connect with those whose experiences of violation and helplessness mirrored her own history. She creates a bridge across trauma. Dr. Landry, the psychologist heading the Foundation's clinical programs, had observed, "Her presence communicates, I know what darkness feels like and I'm here with you in it." For Melissa, the journey with Duchess had catalyzed profound changes. She had left her veterinary technician position to work full-time with the foundation, completing additional certification in animal-assisted therapy. The frightened dog she had impulsively committed to helping had become the center of a vocation she had never imagined. As the celebration continued, Melissa watched Duchess approaching a newcomer, a young woman in a wheelchair, recently referred to their program after an accident left her with both physical injuries and PTSD. The shepherd moved toward her with particular attentiveness, gently placing her head on the woman's lap in silent offer of connection. The moment captured everything that made Duchess extraordinary: her intuitive recognition of suffering, her willing engagement, and her generous offering of her own hard-won wholeness as a bridge to healing. From abandoned prisoner to princess to healer, Duchess had not just survived but transcended her ordeal, transforming the very chain that once bound her into connections of compassion that continued to expand with each life she touched. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that the darkest beginnings can lead to extraordinary light. Remember, it's not what happens to us, but how we transform it that defines our true legacy.